When you look at the newly aligned Power Four, and we'll include Notre Dame, there are 68 teams. I am about to tell you how 20 are going to be favored in 10 or more games. That is a massive number. Right here at lanceslog.com, where all sports packages $100. We've got a great NFL preseason package right now, getting ready for the NFL and college football seasons. We've been winning in baseball. We've been doing this 11 years. Jump on board. Win with us right here at lanceslog.com. We're going to start first with Notre Dame's schedule. Massive opener. And I've said this before. I think the opening weekend and the final weekend of November are going to be critical weekends, and they're going to have just huge impacts on the college football playoff. But Notre Dame starts in College Station against Texas A&M. Bad news for Notre Dame last week. They lost their starting left tackle. So Joe Alt, one of the best, if not the best offensive tackle in football last year, goes on to the NFL. They get a redshirt freshman who started in the bowl last year. First freshman to start at left tackle since Joe Alt. He gets hurt. He's done for the year. So you got to replace both tackles if you're Marcus Freeman. Good news is you got Riley Leonard coming in at quarterback. Best quarterback situation they've had there in a long time. And he should be completely healthy. But at Texas A&M, I think they're going to be a slight dog there. I don't think the offensive line situation is helping that at all. If they do win that game, though, they will be 7-0, hosting Florida State on November the 9th. They could be a dog in that spot. I don't think they will be. Then at USC, possibly could be a dog if USC is much better on defense and Miller Moss is what he was in the bowl game last year. Again, I don't see that, but I think Notre Dame will be favored in at least 10 games. So I've got the Irish, one of these teams, one of these 20 that will be favored in at least 10 games. We jump to the ACC, and our first team we'll take a look at is Clemson. They've still got a great brand. It wasn't too long ago. Clemson was the alpha of college football. They took that crown from Alabama. Since then, it's been good. It just hasn't been great. It hasn't been to the Clemson standard that people were used to under Dabo, playing for national championships. They opened with Georgia. They're a massive double dog there. That's not going to change. They've got a tricky game against NC State. That's in Death Valley, though. They go to Tallahassee to take on Florida State first weekend of October. They're going to be dogs there. There's one more spot Clemson could be a dog in. That's in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech. We'll get to Virginia Tech here in a little bit. But Brent Pry, his squad, the way they played in the second half and the production they've got returning, they are going to be a difficult out. I will say that they will be favored in that game, though. Slight favorite just because of the brand. Clemson is much bigger than Virginia Tech right now. So I will lean that Clemson is favored in 10 games. We will put them right there in the category with Notre Dame. Next, we take a look at Florida State, a team that felt like they were slighted, should have been in the college football playoff last year, undefeated in the regular season. They win the ACC championship really on one leg against Louisville. Now Florida State comes back, DJU at quarterback. They lose Verse, they lose Fisk off that defense, but they still have a ton of talent there. I just don't think it's going to break as well as people think in Tallahassee. With that said, they're still a major brand, and they're still going to be favored in a lot of games. Georgia Tech to open, Boston College, Memphis could be tricky, but the game's in Tallahassee, California. They're 4-0. They're favored in all those games. Then they go to SMU. I think SMU is going to be a little undervalued, and we will get to SMU here in just a couple of minutes because they are making the jump from Group 5 to a Power 4 now, going from the American to the ACC. The way Preston Stone played late, Rhett Lashley has got this team very confident. I still think Florida State is going to be favored on the road just because of the brand. Then the very next week, Clemson in Tallahassee. Great game. Came down to a missed kick last year. Florida State's going to be favored there. They will be dogs against Miami. And I think Florida State's going to be a dog in South Bend. So there are 4 really tricky games on this schedule. And then even when you look at Florida to close, it's in Tallahassee. But at that point, Billy Napier, there's a good chance he's already out. But still, one of those rivalry games, you never know what's going to happen. I will say Florida State is favored in 10 games. Very, very close here. They will be favored against SMU. I think they're favored against Clemson. But on the road against Miami and Notre Dame, I think they will be dogs in that spot. So there you go. We've got 3 teams so far that will be favored in 10-plus games. And again, here's my expectation. If you're favored in 10, at least on paper going into the season, if my program is favored in 10 games, I think 10-2 with some of these brands, most of these brands, is probably going to get you in a college football playoff. So I'm not saying just because these teams are favored in 10 games, they're going to win 10 games. But if I am a fan of that program, I believe going into the season, that's my expectation, is getting to a college football playoff. The Miami Hurricanes, look, 12-14 over 2 years for Mario Cristobal. This is the year he's got to get it done. And he's got an elite quarterback in Cam Ward coming in from Pullman, played for the Cougars the last couple of years and put up really, really big numbers there for Washington State. So Miami opens at Florida. Again, much like Texas A&M and Notre Dame, that week 1 game, this is going to be huge for both Florida and Miami. It reminds me so much of Florida's first opener with Billy Napier against Utah a couple of years ago. They were a slight underdog. It was an ugly game. Cam Rising throws a late pick. Florida wins that game. It was Billy Napier's best win up until this point, his first game, which is pretty incredible. Now they host Miami in just what is such a pivotal game. Right now, Miami is a 2.5-point favorite. They're going to stick a favorite here. Moving on, out South Florida is tricky. They're definitely favored there. Virginia Tech at home is tricky, but they're favored there. At Louisville, circle that one. October 19th, a team they played for the ACC championship. Louisville has this one circled as well. I think the Cardinals are going to be a slight favorite in this one. The very next week is Florida State at home. So I think Miami's favored there. I think Miami's only a dog in 1 game at Louisville. Now, does that mean they go 11-1? Again, not necessarily. But if I'm a Miami fan after 2, to me, below average years under Mario Cristobal, I'm expecting at least 10 wins and getting to a college football playoff. High expectation, yes, but you look at the schedule, it's very, very forgivable. So Miami, I am going to say they're favored in 11 games. Next up in the ACC, we will take a look at a newcomer, SMU, who I think is going to be really good, coming off 11 wins last year, again with Preston Stone at quarterback. I don't think the moment is going to be too big for them. And I go back to 2012 when Texas A&M came into the SEC. Nobody thought that they had any type of chance. And Johnny Manziel, special quarterback, didn't play for the SEC championship, but they gave Alabama a home loss. And at the end of the year, you can make an argument they were the second best team in all of college football. Not saying that's SMU. I'm just saying I don't think the move from the American to the ACC is going to be too big. And you look at the schedule, they're favored in their first 4 games. And then Florida State comes to Dallas. Again, Florida State will be favored in that game. SMU goes to Louisville the very next week. I think Louisville will be favored in that game. I'm giving Louisville a lot of credit. I think Jeff Brom's a really good coach. After that, though, Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, California. SMU has a shot at a really special season in year 1 in the ACC, just based on the schedule. And I do think SMU is a really good team. So I am going to put SMU in the category of teams that will be favored in 10-plus games. And I think the number will be 10. Finally, in the ACC, we look at Virginia Tech. Never would have thought this a year ago. Brent Pry has really turned this around. And at ACC Media Days, Pry said he's going to be disappointed if Virginia Tech's not in the ACC championship game. I think that is a high bar. But when you start to look at the schedule with 20 returning starters, 86% of their offensive production coming back, this is going to be a team that is going to beat a couple of teams that maybe they shouldn't. But you start to look at the schedule is not that difficult. They are going to be favored in their first 4 games, and Rutgers is going to be improved this year. But then they go to Miami. They'll be a dog there. Outside of that, Clemson comes to Blacksburg, to Lane Stadium, to play Virginia Tech on November the 9th. I still think, just based on brands, and I said this earlier with Clemson's schedule, that Clemson will be a favorite. But outside of that, Virginia Tech will not be a dog. So Virginia Tech is going to be favored in 10 games. So right there in the ACC, you've got 5 teams, and if we include Notre Dame with a partial ACC schedule that they play, that's 6 teams right off the bat that will be favored in 10-plus games. We will jump next to the Big 12. First team we take a look at is Kansas. This was almost laughable 5 years ago when Kansas is one of the worst programs in the Power 5. Now that you've got the expansion of the Big 12, I think this conference is going to be better than advertised. But if Jalen Daniels is healthy with Lance Leipold, the head coach of this program that has really turned things around, and you ask experts out there, they will say that he is one of the more difficult coaches to plan for. You start to look at the schedule. First 3 weeks, they're favored. Then they go to Morgantown to take on West Virginia. You know, I was giving West Virginia a little more credit than maybe I should have early when I was going through these schedules. But go back to last year, Neil Brown was on a massive hot seat. and they win 9 games. And Garrett Green's coming back at quarterback. West Virginia is going to be a difficult out, but I go back to week 1. Penn State is a healthy favorite in Morgantown. A lot depends on that game. If West Virginia was to win that game, then West Virginia is definitely going to be favored at home against Kansas. I still think this game is close to a pick. I'm going to lean that West Virginia is favored, so that will be the first game that Kansas is a dog in. Outside of that, they go to Kansas State on October 28th, the Sunflower Showdown. They are going to be a dog in that spot. But after that, Iowa State at home, at BYU, Colorado at home, and at Baylor. I think they're favored all of those games. So Kansas, again, a team that will be favored in 10 games in the regular season, in my opinion. Next, we'll take a look at that Sunflower Showdown that we were talking about, Kansas State. Chris Klieman has got things going at Kansas State so well that their quarterback from last year, Will Howard, is on to Ohio State. And this wasn't just a one-sided deal where Will Howard was like, I want to go win a national championship. Chris Klieman believes that Avery Johnson is maybe the most impactful signee that they've ever had in Manhattan. And I think Avery Johnson is going to be an immediate impact guy. You saw him in the bowl last year. The guy can absolutely fly once he refines a little bit. He's a guy that can throw it down the field. Watch out. At Tulane, week 2, John Summerall taking over that program. 11 o'clock sleepy game. Kansas State has lost some of these games before. I remember back in the day against Marshall, South Dakota State. They've had some bad early season losses, but not under Chris Klieman, and I don't think it starts here. They'll definitely be favored in that game. Arizona with Noah Fafita back. They're going to be a tough out, but that's in Manhattan at BYU. Again, Kalani Sitake on a hot seat. Don't think it's going to be a great product this year. Oklahoma State coming to Manhattan. Should be a hell of a game, but K-State will be favored there. At Colorado, they're favored. At West Virginia, again, that's a little shaky. I am going to say that Kansas State will be favored there. They're going to be favored at home against Kansas, Houston, Arizona State, Cincinnati, at Iowa State. Rocco Beck, how good's he going to be? Matt Campbell seems like he's lost a little steam, but you never know with Iowa State. Maybe they're going to be better than advertised, but that would be the only potential pitfall. I look at this, Kansas State's going to be favored in 11 or 12 games, which is incredible. And just by that, they probably should be your favorite in the Big 12. And obviously, you win the Big 12, you get an automatic bid. I'm going to take a look at one more team of the Big 12. That is the Utah Utes. So good in the Pac-12. And Kyle Whittingham, one of the most underrated coaches over the last 20 years in all of college football. At Oak State, week 4 on September 21st. I think they're going to be a dog there. Outside of that, possibly to end the season against Central Florida. I don't know how good Central Florida is going to be, but maybe KJ Jefferson under Gus Malzahn really develops, plays great football, and we've seen Central Florida have special seasons. But even if they're a dog there, worst case, they're a dog in 2 spots. That is it. So 3 teams out of the Big 12 will be favored in 10-plus games. I jump now to the Big 10, one of the obviously premier conferences in all of college football. And I think there are 4 teams that you can take a look at the Big 10. I'm going to start with the Iowa Hawkeyes. And this one's amazing when you really start to digest the schedule for the Hawkeyes. Brian Ferentz, the offensive coordinator last year, we had fun, like the Ferentz watch. And, he had to have so many points scored and so many yards to retain his job. It was never going to happen. And the offense is one of the worst we've ever seen. And they still find a way to win 10 games. Now you have the expansion of the Big 10, and you're like, damn, it's going to get more difficult for teams that were in the West now that you don't have divisions. But when you start to look at the schedule, my gosh. So week 2 in the Cyhawk is always a tricky game against Iowa State. Iowa's going to be favored there, though. Then they go to Minnesota to end September. They're still going to be favored there. At Ohio State, they're definitely dogs to begin October. Outside of that, they've got Wisconsin at home. I think they're going to be favored there. At UCLA, at Maryland, and they ended against what should be an improved Nebraska team, but that's in Iowa City. They're going to be favored there. I think Iowa is going to be favored in 11 games, and that is absolutely incredible when you think about the expansion of the Big 10 Conference. And Iowa winning 10 with defense last year, they have got a ton coming back. Cade McNamara healthy at quarterback. The offense cannot get any worse. I believe it's going to be a touchdown per game better. That should equate to possibly 10 or 11 wins. And don't be surprised, I know this sounds crazy, if Iowa found themselves back in the Big Ten championship game. With that said, huge expectations for Penn State. James Franklin didn't seem like he was ever going to find a 14 playoff, at least a berth into a 14 playoff. Now we expand it to 12, and I think all Penn State fans are like, damn, if we don't get there this year, we're never going to get there. Well, tricky game to start in Morgantown against West Virginia. I've already told you Penn State's going to be favored in that game at 11 o'clock Fox, the big noon kickoff. They're favored there. At USC is the next time they could possibly be a dog, October 12th. I think Penn State's going to be a slight favorite there. A lot of it's going to be dependent upon how much improved this USC defense is. We'll get a good look at that, good gauge before that October 12th game. Then Penn State goes to Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's going to be improved, but good enough to be favored. Don't know. Ohio State comes to Penn State on November the 2nd. Ohio State's definitely going to be favored there. Outside of that, Penn State's not a dog. So really, there are 3 shots of Penn State being a dog: at Ohio State, hosting Ohio State, at USC, at Wisconsin. But I think they'll be favored at least one of those 2 games, USC, Wisconsin. So I think Penn State is also going to qualify as one of our teams that will be favored in 10-plus games. Ohio State, there's no reason to even go through the schedule. Ohio State more than likely favored in every game. The only one that they would possibly not be favored in would be against the Oregon Ducks when they go to Autzen, which is being billed, and rightfully so, is the regular season game of the year. So Ohio State favored in 11 or 12 games. Even if we say the Ducks are favored in that game, Ohio State on paper favored in 11 games. Oregon, the team that we're talking about right there to finish up the Big Ten. Oregon's got some interesting out-of-conference games. Boise State in week 2. They got to go to Corvallis, the old school Civil War against Oregon State. That is on September 14th. That should be a fun game, but Oregon's definitely going to be a favorite, healthy favorite there. The only chance they've got to be dogs on this schedule, to me, Ohio State, obviously they're hosting. I think I'm just leaning that Oregon might be a 1 or 2 point favorite in that game. They go to Michigan. We should know by the first weekend of November how good this Michigan team is. 15-0 last year, defending national champions. But how good is this offense going to be? Donovan Edwards is going to be fantastic. But Blake Corum, running back 1, gone to the NFL now, playing for the Rams. J.J. McCarthy's probably going to be your starting quarterback sooner than later in Minnesota. And I don't know what Alex Orji brings to Michigan. I think Michigan's probably a 9-3 team. And even at Michigan, I think Oregon could be a favorite here. They're definitely going to be favored in at least 10 games. So that gives you 4 out of the Big Ten. Finally, we take a look at the standard in all of college football when we're talking about conferences, and that is the SEC. We will start first with Alabama. And I've got to pull this number because it was well documented. We talked about this a lot, that Alabama, from Nick Saban second SEC championship against Florida in 2009, the last time they were a dog until, I don't even remember, it was seasons and seasons and seasons. The numbers are crazy how many times they've been favored. Now Kalen DeBoer takes over this program, and I don't know. At Wisconsin, Bama's definitely going to be favored, but hosting Georgia at home, I think Georgia's probably a slight favorite there. Alabama goes to Tennessee. We remember in 2022 in Knoxville, Hendon Hooker, tremendous track meet, fun game. If Jahmyr Gibbs makes a grab down the stretch, Alabama probably wins that game, but they lost. How good is Nico going to be? And really, the question mark for both of these teams, Alabama and Tennessee secondary. So we could get another shootout there. I'm going to say Tennessee is a slight favorite there. And then at LSU, I think LSU's a slight favorite. I don't know if I put Alabama in this category to be favored in 10 games, which is crazy. Win total in Las Vegas is 9.5, but this schedule is brutal. So Georgia, I'll say they're a dog. Tennessee or LSU, one of those two, they're a dog. They've got to go to Oklahoma. They've got Missouri on the schedule. That game's in Tuscaloosa. Oh, I still with a brand. I've got to go that Alabama's favored in 10 games. It just seems amazing that you could go from literally favored in 3 or 4 consecutive seasons in every game to being an underdog in 3 or 4 games. So I'll lean that Bama, based on the brand, and I do think the offense is going to be really good, they will ultimately be favored in 10 games. Georgia, although there's really no reason to get into this because Georgia is the standard right now in college football. But Georgia plays not 1, not 2, but 3 road games against preseason top 6 teams. On the road against Bama, on the road against Texas, on the road against Ole Miss. I've got a feeling Georgia's favored in all those games. So Georgia in this category. LSU is interesting. I think LSU in year 3, the expectation should be from playing for an SEC championship to a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback to now in year 3, things have really got to settle in for Brian Kelly. And look, there will be the excuse you can't lose a generational quarterback like Jaden Daniels, but Garrett Nussmeier is a guy that has paid his dues. He's backed it up. And when we've seen him, he's looked pretty good. LSU is definitely a favorite in the opener against SC, so that number 6 right now. The next chance they would have to be a dog is Ole Miss, hosting Ole Miss at home. I think LSU was actually a slight favorite in this game last year that they lost. Unbelievable track meet, fun game. I think LSU's favored here. They go to Arkansas. They'll be favored there. At A&M, that's one to look at. I think they could be a dog at A&M because I think A&M is going to be better than advertised. Alabama at home, they could be a dog there. Outside of that, they go to Florida. They're going to be favored there. Vanderbilt and Oklahoma at home, they're favored in all those games. I will say that LSU is favored in at least 10 games, and 10 is probably the number. Missouri, if you're looking at beneficial schedules for a team that won 11 games and a team that is, fingers crossed to get to a college football playoff, something we never thought we would see in the SEC with Missouri coming into the conference in 2012. You look at Mizzou's first 4 games, easily favored. Then they go to College Station. Again, I think A&M is going to be better than advertised. I think A&M's favored in that game. They host Auburn. Missouri will be favored there. They go to Bama. They're definitely a dog there. Oklahoma. This is going to be the decider on whether or not Missouri is favored in 10 games. Oklahoma comes to Columbia. I am going to say Missouri is a slight favorite. Should be a fantastic game. So I will say that Missouri qualifies as one of our teams that will be favored in 10-plus games this year. Just 3 more in the SEC for you. By the way, Lance'sLock.com, getting ready for our 11th football season. We win. That's all we do. It's $100 for the entire month. You get absolutely everything: sides, total, player props. We are going to spray the board this year. Really excited about that. So jump on board at Lance'sLock.com. Again, new website. We've got this YouTube channel, win at Lance'sLock.com. We would appreciate you liking, subscribing, jumping on board. A lot of exciting stuff coming up for the 2024 season. Ole Miss, next team we're looking at, 11 wins, most in school history. Expectation with Jackson Dart coming back as this team is going to be outstanding. At LSU, first chance they have it being a dog, and I think they will be a dog on October the 12th. They host Oklahoma. I think they're going to be favored there. They host Georgia. They'll be a dog there, and that's it. Ole Miss will be favored in 10 games, and if I'm an Ole Miss fan, it is now or never for me. Like, we never saw Atlanta. That wasn't surprising, but if we can't get into a 12-team playoff with what we've got coming back and with that schedule, that's a problem. A&M we'll take a quick look at. I don't know if A&M is going to qualify. We'll take a look at Texas first because I think Texas definitely does. At Michigan, week 2, the only thing that Michigan's got going for them is I think they're going to be still really good. But Michigan at that point will have a 16-game winning streak, and they're still your defending champions. I just got a feeling Vegas doesn't care about any of that. Texas is going to be viewed as the better team. Now, C.J. Baxter being out for the season, Jadon Blue having to carry the load after Jonathan Brooks goes to the NFL. Running back has become a question mark for Texas. I still think Texas will be a slight favorite in that game. Oklahoma, revenge game, neutral site. I think Texas is favored there. Georgia coming to Austin. I'm going to say they're a dog there. And this is where it gets tricky. At A&M to end the season, could A&M possibly be a favorite? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say Texas is favored in that game, but I think it's going to be tight, and I think that game will have major implications. Finally, we look at A&M, but we're going to say Texas does qualify, that they're going to be favored 10 game. A&M, they're going to be favored week 1 against Notre Dame. It's going to be really, really tight, but I think Texas A&M is slight favorite. Next chance they have it being a dog, I don't think they're a dog at home against Missouri. I don't know if they're a dog at home against LSU. At Auburn, they could be a dog, and they could be a dog against Texas. I'm going to say A&M 9 or 10. We're still going to qualify A&M here. So that's 8 out of the SEC. That is 3 out of the Big 12. That is 4 out of the Big 10. That is 6, including Notre Dame, out of the ACC. So quick math, that is 20 of the 68 teams of the Power 4 in Notre Dame that will be favored in 10-plus games. If you're a fan of one of these teams, you definitely expect your team to get to a college football playoff. It's not that easy. Only 12 get there. Again, Lance'sLock.com. Like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We would appreciate that. Share it with your friends. Let's win this.